And we're back. So, welcome back, everybody. Exciting to have you all here. And we're going to move right on to our next amazing presenter. Again, I'm Patty Scott. Up Hypnosis Institute is my company, and we are hosting this for the 20th year since the very first World Hypnotism Day back in 2005. We've done an event every single year. And now I'm so thrilled that someone that I really enjoy, because my former career, I was a singer, so I love that vibration of sound all around me. I'm convinced that kept me really healthy for many, many years, all of those vibrating things in my body. So he's going to teach us about vibration and about sound healing. So I'm just going to let you go ahead and start. You already said you're from Woodstock. You can tell them anything else you'd like them to know about you. And take it away, Peter.
Okay, I'm going to make a dramatic entrance now, okay?
There you go.
There. Now I'm on the screen. All right. And I see a number of people have posted their pictures up there, so they may still be like having a drink or taking care of bathroom duties or whatever. But as people drift back in, and that's of course one of, as we all know, that's one of those connective words that we like to use. As people drift back in, I will slowly build into my presentation and kind of segue in and temporize, which is a great word, which is the creative use of time. How does one temporize in a sort of form of clearing one's throat, so to speak? And so, where do I start? Well, first of all, I went to some trouble here because I feel like I'm surrounded by experts in setup, and so I really wanted to make sure that the lighting was optimal and the setting behind me. I see one person has a map of the world behind them, and somebody else, art may have gone down under the glacier at the moment. All that's showing is the glacier. But the creative use of backdrop and lighting, and I have my nano Yeti nano microphone here plugged in, which is supposed to augment the sound. So I hope the sound is good. One of the problems that people had in the early days with Zoom, particularly in terms of music, was it was horrible. It was a horrible platform for music. And Zoom did some work, and there's now a setting, if any of you are interested, if you're ever singing or playing music or anything that you want to do over the internet, over Zoom in particular, there's a setting up in the upper left hand corner that says original sound for musicians off or on. What they had done in the beginning was to do something that would suppress background noise, which makes a lot of sense. But what it does, it inhibits any kind of a sustained sound, so that if there's a hum, a refrigerator or something, it will, well, that's exactly what I'm working to get, is sustained sound. Otherwise, everything be very staccato. And that's not how we communicate. There's a length and a breadth, and I thought what I would do here is kind of show and tell, so that because I use sound in different instruments in different ways, and I integrate them with my practice. Last year, and also in preparation for this, I went back because I had a recording of last year's World Hypnosis Day. And so earlier today, I went and I looked at it to see, what did I actually say, so that I wouldn't repeat it. Well, undoubtedly, I will repeat certain things because that's the nature of what we do. We kind of recycle the same material and try to keep it fresh and tweak it and add a few bells and whistles. But it's, I came into the field in 1985, as I said. I interviewed this wonderful, creative, brilliant, haunted by demons genius named Richard Zarrow, who had trained with John Grinder, and I got involved with the study of hypnosis. And in around 88 or 89, Richard went to the first national, or maybe second, NGH conference. And he came back and he said, next year you have to go and you should put in a proposal to present. And I thought, well, gee willikers, I'm just a real kind of naive beginner. What can I talk about? So I thought, well, and it's interesting because I have a cassette tape. We were talking about, Art was talking about cassettes, and I have a cassette tape from the NGH from 1990, which is 34 years ago, on my first presentation that I gave there, and it was sound and music for hypnosis. So essentially, I've been kind of working this theme for a long time, and many people are familiar with using music as a background, which is wonderful. And I, of course, started out doing that a lot, and I still frequently do that. I have a wide selection of different genres of music that I find are conducive to relaxation. The obvious choices of nature sounds and wind and surf, waves coming in, rain, those kinds of things have been around for a while. Different kinds of new age recordings, anything that has a kind of continuous drony thing. You don't want big interruptions in general. So I moved from that to become more and more daring in combining and incorporating actual instruments and live music in conjunction with the hypnosis. And so this is a lot of what I use fall under the category of what are called drone instruments. A drone is any kind of a continuous sound. This, some of you may be familiar with. It's a little bellows type of instrument from India called a shruti box, and it has 12 keys here that cover different holes, and by opening up the little dial here, you uncover a hole which allows air to go through it. And so this is now for most people, a very melodious and harmonious sound. I have it set up for a C, a G, and a C an octave above. And what it sounds like is this. And I can go slower or faster, but the idea is to have a continuous sound. And because it's a bellows, it also to some extent replicates one of our basic biological functions, which is the breath. We are all bellowing all the time. And it's often used with something called kirtan, which has become more and more popular, which is where people get together and they chant bhajans or Hindu devotional chants to different deities. Krishna, Shiva, Durga, Kali, gods and goddesses from the Hindu pantheon. So, it's there in the background, and it's providing this drone, and you sing over it, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. That's, from the all-time hit parade. That's number one. Everybody knows that one because of those young fellas with their head shaved in a little ponytail at the airports who were around in the 60s and 70s, and they're still around. But this idea of a continuous sound, that it kind of fades in and out of consciousness. Even as I'm talking to you, there's this other aspect of sound that's going on, and the mind can kind of oscillate back and forth between going, oh, he's playing a little bit louder now, or it's softer now. And Art, you had mentioned bypassing the critical faculty, or I don't know if you use the term bypassing, but that's often said. It's like the dog, that's the three-headed dog, Cerberus, who is at the guardian, at the gate, and you need to do something, throw it a bone. You need to distract its attention, give it something to think about, so that you can kind of slip in, even though you're invited, even though we are invited into the people come to us, and they're paying us, and of course that's the great irony. They're paying us to help them, and yet there often is some reluctance or caution, or not knowing how to let go. So we have to provide an environment of safety and trust, and that's the most important thing. So I have these toys that I use to do this, and this is one that I'll often use. As I said, certain sounds of nature seem to have a very calming and lulling effect. And this very large stick here is hollow. This comes originally from the Amazon, and it's called a rain stick. Something about that sound. It's embedded deep in our primordial, prehistoric memories. The sounds of rain, maybe because it was good if it rained, that means there won't be a drought or whatever. But those kinds of sounds, very old. I have also a big drum. I didn't bring it over here, called an ocean drum. Did I demonstrate that for you guys last year? Do you remember? Does it ring a bell? Does the name Pavlov ring a bell? All right. All right. Well, give me 1 second, and I'll get my ocean drum, because that's fun.
It's never the same anyway.
No. And I have all my stuff here within reach, pretty much, so that I don't have to go very far to get it. There you go. This is an ocean drum. Now you can see there are little ball bearings in here that are moving around, and that's what makes the sound. Now, of course, you Florida folks and you folks on the coast of Australia don't need that sort of stuff. We're up here in the mountains and the forest. We're not close to the ocean. But anything that replicates the sound of nature, wind, and so on and so forth is generally going to, maybe not thunder or earthquakes. Those might be disturbing, but most other sounds of nature are calming. I also want to tie in here a quote I came across from the very well respected and famous and influential hypnotherapist Milton Erickson, where he said essentially the task as worked out was comparable to that of composing music intended to produce a certain effect upon the listener. Words and ideas rather than notes of music were employed in selected sequences, patterns, rhythms, and other relationships. And by this composition, it was hoped to evoke profound responses in the subject, not only in terms of what the story could mean, but which would be in accord with the established patterns of behavior deriving from his experiential past. Now, Erickson had a knack of saying things that, as I read them, I go into trance. I don't know if anyone else experienced that, Art, when you were doing your presentation, even though there was a lot of factual information, I found myself going into a trance as I was listening to it and reading stuff there. And so this is what do we do to provide an environment of safety and relaxation, as well as what sounds are conducive to those states. And so this is an area of fascination for me, and studying ancient cultures. The tradition of shamanism has been one of great fascination for me. And I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with a couple of people who knew a bit about it. One was a gentleman that I met in 1988 or 89, just a year or two after, right around the same time as I was getting started in hypnosis, named Joseph Real, or a beautiful painted arrow, who was from the Picaris Pueblo. And I knew about the use of sound in mystical settings primarily from Hindu tradition, from the Sanskrit, from the Tibetan Buddhists, but I had not heard anything about Native American people working with sound as a mystical vehicle. So I was very fascinated with this. And Joseph came through Woodstock a number of times teaching, and I became a student of his, and we did work with him, and he emphasized the importance of the vowel sounds. And so when I'm working with clients to give them a practice that they can use, a lot of them will say, well, you're a musician and I'm not. So what can I do that can use sound and music that I could wrap my mind and hands around, that I wouldn't be intimidated by? And I said, well, the voice is the first instrument, and everyone, if in Africa they have a proverb that says, if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. So we have a lot of concerns in our culture. We're very professionally oriented. You are gifted in this area or not. And other more ancient cultures have a much more inclusive view. If you go to Indonesia, in Bali, they say, and Shelley will probably talk about this because she's been there many times, they say, we have no art, we do everything the best we can. So that's a wonderful approach, that there's, the art of living, that my life is a work of art. But beyond that, that it's not only for commercial purposes, but it's an expression of one's creativity. And so using the voice in a way, because what we're talking about here is also the principles of vibration, the ancient Hermetic principles of everything is vibrating. And you said something at the beginning about higher vibrations, and we have this, we have these expressions, so and so has really good vibes. or you know, I got bad vibes from that place. I mean, for those of you who remember the 60s, we used a lot of those expressions. But it refers to the vibration. If we're not hearing it, we're feeling it. We can feel a certain vibration, but when it becomes audible, and it affects the body, both from the outside, but certainly from the inside. So the voice is generated from inside, and the just to sit and tone, for instance, to go, you know, just to go. Well, most basic one that most people know is the three-part syllable om. Yes, Patty's making her lips in that sign. Om. And it's not really my understanding, and I'm not, you know, an expert on any of this. I'm just a student, just a humble student, really. And it's not OM so much it is as AUM. And it represents the arc of all creation that is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva in the Hindu Trinity, that represents beginning creation, Brahma, Vishnu sustaining, and Shiva the destruction. So as one mouths this, it becomes an extended exercise in breath as well, an audible version of long breath, which now I think is very popular with Wim Hof breathers and other people, but it's been around for a long time, this idea that one can extend the breath. If you extend the breath, you live longer and you're healthier and you're going to be calmer. What happens when people get typically excited? They either hold their breath or they're breathing very fast. So the opposite of that, just common sense, is to slow the whole mechanism down, slow the breathing down. And one way of doing that is to give you something that you can actually play with, which is the sound of it. So if I were to go, see how long I can hold that and do it a few times. That is going to slow everything down, which is a good thing. And so, very briefly, and I'm condensing like a day-long workshop into 45 minutes or 50 minutes here. Joseph emphasized the importance of the vowel sounds, and he said between his native tongue, which is Tiwa, which is from the Picaris Pueblo, his father's tribe, Tiwa, English and Spanish. He was trilingual, and he said he found correspondence in all three languages from the basic sounds of these five letters, which are U, O, A, E, and I. And the sounds are U, which is the letter U, and I teach this in a way that people can actually make mudras. Let me show you here, like this on the pelvic floor of the letter U, which kind of looks like a basket. And each of these sounds has a principal idea connected with it. The letter U, the sound U, the principal idea is carrying. Carrying. What are we carrying in life? What are we carrying? An idea. Women carry children, Hayasheli, in that area of their body. So that to chant the letter U and to make the sound ooh and to think about the idea of carrying ooh, and again to hold it as long as possible. And during this practice, I also recommend use it as a self-diagnostic practice that you can notice your posture. how unconscious we are often of our posture. Am I holding tension in my jaw, in my neck? Are my shoulders up here? Is my anal sphincter tight? Is my belly tight? What can I loosen up? What can I relax as I let the sound permeate my body? By the way, Art, I was thinking about that slide you showed of the people up with their arm, and I've been doing Tai Chi and Qi Kung for the last 4 years, and some of the postures are that. You got your arms up here, and by George, my testosterone's up, my cortisol's down. So this stuff works. Thank you. Uh, Yay! Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the next sound is the letter O. And the O is, again, you can make a mudra of an O and place it as a circle with the tips of my middle fingers by my belly button and my thumbs up around my solar uh, plexus. And the letter O is sounded O. And it is childlike innocence, the principal idea, or teachability. So one then goes, and even like that's a sound and an expression that we make when we are pleasantly surprised by something. We go, oh, oh. So, oh. And it's not important what note you're making, or if you're singing on key or in key or in pitch. That's not important. And the next is the letter A, which makes the sound ah, which is in the heart center. And I make a little capital A like that, which is also close to this very ancient mudra of prayer. But I've got my thumbs as the crossbar here. And so the letter A makes the sound ah. And that is about purification or purifying light. And so the fourth is the letter E, which makes the sound eh. So even though my name is spelled Peter, the vowel sounds in my name are E and E. Peter. It's not Peter. I can't even say it. Anyway, so the E is often in English and Spanish an sound. So that's in the throat area, and that is the principal idea of that sound is placement or relationship. So I make this, which kind of looks like an E, a letter E, and I put it here, and I go, and then finally up here is the forehead, the old third eye, the pineal gland, and that letter I makes the sound of E. So that is the principal idea that's connected with that is purification. No, I'm sorry, awareness. So, and I make like a letter I and imagine a little imaginary dot over it there. Be careful which finger you use. You don't want to use this finger. That might look bad. So you want to use your forefinger. All right. So, and it's funny because generally speaking, I don't like systems. I'm kind of an anti-system guy, and I'm always like questioning different systems and saying somebody made that up. Like people will ask me, "Well, you work with bowls. Which singing bowls go with which chakras?" And I'm like, whichever one you want, doesn't really matter. I've never seen any kind of research that has shown a correlation between a note and a chakra. I'm sure there is, but it's more of an individual thing. Like, for Michael on Tuesday, the note A might correspond with his heart, but for Shelley on Wednesday, it might be a D. So we don't, I don't, but I accept, sometimes I just say, all right, use it as a working model. I can't say why it works, but I really trust this person that I got this information from. And the other thing about Joseph Real, our beautiful painted arrow, that was so fascinating was I would go and see him talk, and he would tell these marvelous stories. And year after year, he would come through Woodstock, and he would come and give a talk, and I would go and I would talk, and I would come out of the talk feeling just absolutely lit up and blissed out. And someone would say, what did he talk about? And I'd say, it was something about light and sound, but I really don't remember. And the next year I'd be determined, oh, I'm going to really pay attention this year. And again, the same thing would happen. And finally I said to him, Joseph, because he's a kind of savvy Indian guy. He's got a double master's in political science and Spanish, as well as being raised traditionally on the reservation. I said, Joseph, did you ever study hypnosis? He goes, oh yeah, sure. So, so he understood the use of language and rhythm, similar to that quote from Erickson's that I had read earlier. Like, how do we use uh, the sound of our voice and our words, the onomatopoetic aspect of it, as well as the literal meaning of it. Joseph would often say, human mind is metaphor mind. Human mind is metaphor mind. That human beings understand, the only people that really don't, in my experience, process metaphor that well in general are people on the spectrum. People on the autism Asperger spectrum, they think very literally. I worked with a young man and I was using metaphor and he didn't understand what I was saying. But most people will make that translation. You know, the word metaphor comes from meta, across, and pheron, to carry. So it's to carry something across from one area of meaning to another. And we make these associations and metaphors. So if I tell someone, you know, look, I have these tuning forks here, and I use the tuning forks. I was talking about the show and tell, Shelley, before you came on. I said I was going to just show and tell, and I showed him my little, what Spencer Hum said, something like it was like, wow, you have an ohm in a suitcase, in a briefcase there. It appealed to him for his corporate presentations. My little Shruti box. But these are tuning forks, which again are fairly non-threatening to people. If I take this instrument out, and this is obviously something fairly exotic. Most people have not seen it before. It's beautiful, and I'm going to play it for you in a couple minutes. But if I want to make it comfortable and familiar for people, and if I say, well, tuning forks, everybody knows what tuning forks are, right? Oh, yeah. And so I'm going to explain to you that these two tuning forks are in a relationship of a fifth. They're a C and a G. And when I play them both at the same time and hold one up to each ear, and I do this by tapping gently on my knee. You hear that? I'm holding it close to the microphone. Yeah. So, and I'll go up to the client, tell them what I'm doing, and hold them about an inch or two from each ear. But before I do this, as hypnotherapists, we all know the importance of setup, right? So the setup is I tell them, there's research in my friend John Beaulieu's book, Human Tuning. Scientific study was done in a laboratory, and you can look it up, Med Publishing, that showed that people who heard this combination, this particular relationship of a perfect fifth, it was a stress deregulator. There was an increase in the production of nitric oxide. Oh, wow. What is nitric oxide? Isn't that what I do in the dentist? No, that's nitrous oxide. Nitric oxide is something that the body releases naturally that helps lower blood pressure, and it's like one of those really good things. So we want more of that. So I tell them that, and they believe this. There's a metaphor that is being created in a belief system. Whether it does or not, I hope it does. I believe it does. But if they believe it does, there's a much greater chance of it happening. So that's how, I'll use tuning forks. I showed you that. Different instruments evoke different feelings. I have done, mostly I'll set up a whole bunch of singing bowls and gongs, which I chose to not do today. I thought I'd work with other instruments, including voice. But I did a concert once with 45 minutes, 50 minutes of gongs and singing bowls. And then for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I took this instrument out, which is a native style, plains style flute, and I played it. And someone came up to me afterward and said, when you played that flute, I went off into a past life where I was sitting with a bunch of buffalo. And, it's, you never know what sounds will affect certain people in certain ways. So, there are some people that I have a bunch of things on my checklist on my form when people come to see me, and it says, check all areas that you're interested in working on today, and along with the most expected ones of stress management, weight management, smoking cessation. There's also, past lives, shamanic journeying, sound healing, and people will sometimes say, well, I came in because I have a fear of driving over high bridges, but you do shamanic journeying work? I didn't know that. I'm very interested in doing that, and could we do some of that as well? And I'll go, sure. I happen to have my shamanic journey drum right here, which I'm very proud of because I made it. And most of the instruments, I've always said I'm a player, not a maker. I have great respect for the people who make the instruments, but I had the opportunity to go to a drum making workshop a few years ago with a woman who calls herself a drum doula. So she helps people birth drums. And there it is. And I had an artist friend of mine paint some Thunderbirds on it. And so there's different ways to use rhythm. One of the ways that I'll sometimes use it, not in a traditional Harner-based journeying fashion for those who are familiar with that, but just to establish security and safety, is as a heartbeat. What are the first sounds that we hear? The safest place we've ever been, any of us in our lives, in the womb. And what are the sounds that we hear there? There's a sound like the ocean drum, that kind of whooshing sound, which is the mother's breathing in the background. There's some, gurgly sounds, and there's this heartbeat, which is mother's heartbeat. So these sounds, if we can recreate them, may very well help to recreate an atmosphere of safety and permission to be able to relax more, to be able to untangle some of those early bad hypnosis things that we heard when we were little, right? Which you were talking about earlier, Art. The things that people unconsciously said around us that we took in as, without questioning. So that use, now, let's see, how much time do I have left? About 10 minutes?
Yeah, you have about 9, 10 minutes. Yeah.
9 or 10 minutes. Okay. Well, which is it? 9 or 10? Um,
Well,
all right. So the other thing I've been experimenting with is to combine talking with sound. And I have this beautiful instrument which is called an ngoni, which is a harp-like instrument from Africa, Burkina Faso to be specific. And for me, it's a very hypnotic sound. So I might say to somebody, while you're listening to me and finding a place of comfort in your chair, I would suggest that you consider the fact that things are not as we think they are often. That we do not exist in an absolute reality, but really more in a perceptual reality. And our perceptual reality, we don't often know things in isolation, but more often we know them in relationship. So right now you're hearing two notes, and they're in relationship. And there's something that happens in the human brain, which is we seek patterns. Pattern recognition is part of how we operate. So after a while, if you hear this note, you're going to expect this note. So if I'm playing these two notes repeatedly like that, it becomes familiar after a while. And after a while, we don't even notice it because the brain is wired to notice change. So, oh, there's something different. Something new has been introduced. So we start with simple patterns when we're young. There's mommy and daddy and me. And then as we get older, there's more complex relationships. So using sound and the relationship of notes as an ongoing metaphor for understanding patterns in our own behavior and perception, and why we expect things to be a certain way is because that's how they've been before. So that was just sort of like riffing off of an idea and using the sound of it as a sound, but also as a metaphor, as in a way for me to cheat, basically. It's a way for me to get out of my fucking conscious mind, excuse my language, so that I can get into a trance because, like Erickson said, I usually say unconscious, do your thing to himself. Because he said, I get out of the way because my unconscious does a much better job of it than my conscious mind. So if I can kind of lull myself into one of those states through playing an instrument, here's another very simple little one. I'll end with this. This is also from Africa based. It's a kalimba, and it sounds like this. It's very much like a nursery school sound. Very calming. The scale is a pentatonic scale. Very familiar. Could sing a bunch of nursery rhymes that would go with that scale. So, there we go. The end. I could go on, but that's plenty to deal with, right? You have all your homework cut out for you there. Practice your vowel sounds. Go find a drum somewhere. If you can't, bang on a can.
are there any questions for Peter?
Yeah, unmute yourself. Yes, sir. All right.
Back in the day when HemiSync was really big, was coming out, and I heard somebody say that if you will play a tone in one ear and then a tone in the other ear, and you put them up like that, that the brain will create a chord out of that by creating the matching tone that goes with those two to make a pleasing chord. I never saw any more about that. Is that true or not true? What do you think?
Well,
What's that?
true and not true is greatly overvalued. I
Okay.
don't know if it's true or not true, but I do work with a set of 5 tuning forks called the brain tuners, which
Mhm.
are always done 2 at a time. I may have you did. I don't know if you got a set from me or you saw me demonstrate them, but it's a fundamental, and then it's the relationship one by one with a set of 4 other forks that create a beat pattern that is in beta, alpha, theta, and delta range.
Okay. Hmm.
Brain- The brain, this is similar to what you're saying. The brain perceives the difference tone, the beat
Hmm.
pattern that is created between, say, a tuning fork that's vibrating at 256 and one that's vibrating at 276. The brain hears 20 beats per second. So that's the closest that I know of that to
Hmm.
answer that question.
I think Dominique had a question.
I had a question. I had a statement, actually.
Yeah,
Is
Linda.
that the secret chord that pleased the Lord
You know, I
that
cried,
Leonard
I
Cohen
cried
spoke
when
about,
I watched that
sang about?
documentary.
I'm
I
sorry?
Leonard Cohen, I don't know who he was as a person, but he channeled some stuff that was
Oh,
just
yeah. Yeah.
extraordinary,
Yes, he
right?
did.
Yeah,
I mean, I can still feel him in my heart. All of his songs are like
yeah, yeah. He was deep.
shaking my head. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I plug something for a second? I think I'm allowed to do that in the last minute, right?
Sure. Yeah. Go
Okay.
for it.
I have 2 seminars coming up in Woodstock. Come visit beautiful Woodstock and nestled in the heart of the Catskills. We have Tibetan Buddhist monasteries. We have Sufi dancers. We have all manner of weird hippies still wandering the streets. One of my 2 main mentors over the last 35 years in healing and hypnosis is Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, who is a psychiatrist and a sun dancer and a water pourer of Cherokee and Lakota heritage, and the author of 7 books, the most famous of which is Coyote Medicine, the Coyote Trilogy. And he and his wife Barbara will be coming to Woodstock in 2 weeks here for this. There's a picture of the 3 of us for 3 days of coyote hypnosis, a playful approach to narrative trance work. So that's the idea of the importance of story, both the stories that our clients are telling themselves and others and believe in, and the stories that we can tell them that may change their mind or point of view.
And how can people contact you to find out about your events?
Yeah. Well, I'm easy to find. You can find me through my website, soundsforhealing.com, or on Facebook. I have a presence. I'm on Instagram. I'm easy to find. And the other one, which I'm really excited about in April, again in Woodstock, will be 3 days on the Wounded Healer, which is a transformational gathering for healers. So
And
not
that's in Woodstock too, as well?
yeah, yeah, right in Woodstock at a wonderful retreat center here called the Nest, which has residential accommodations available. And this is not specifically hypnosis or sound healing, but it is something that's very close to my heart. Recently, the older I get, the more I realize that most everyone has some wounds, and a lot of the people who are drawn to the field of healing are still have long unattended boo-boos that it's helpful to come together in community and help support each other so we can move forward and keep going with our work. So that's end of plug.
And Jen had a question. She had her hand up.
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, thank you. You already answered my question about how you would use it in a session.
Yeah.
Although I think I'd have to really practice with an instrument because I'd be going, oh, wait, that didn't sound right. But I
Yeah.
was wondering, I don't know why, but my mind went to addiction, like, people who are trying to quit smoking or quit different things. And sometimes, the breath work helps them to replace to help them through those times where they're just starting to quit. But I was wondering if that, mentioning that they could learn an instrument or have that kind of vibration might help them replace that.
Well, I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but as my grandmother used to say, it can't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that gets somebody involved in creating. One of the things that happens with people in addiction is they're just in an endless cycle of using and getting high and finding a way to use more, and it becomes a way of avoiding being involved and engaged with life. So any kind of practice that you can give somebody, whether it's, finger painting or stamp collecting or anything, but more where they're actually doing something with an instrument. That's why the drum, the flute, the tuning forks, these are the symbol. This is a wonderful gong here. It's a small gong. You can get it for $100, and it sounds great. So I said, go, bang on. John Lennon said, "I'm a musician. Give me a garbage can. I'll make music on it." We get way too concerned with, do I have a bass clarinet? You can make sounds with anything. Little children, I have, rattles. I didn't, but why are babies given rattles in cribs? Why? What's up with that? So there's something that the shamans knew about rattles, is that sound has an effect on people. I don't know why, but it does. So, okay.
Beautiful.
Any other questions? No.
Thank you, Peter.
One last one. Where would I go to get a rain drum?
Oh, well, you made me say it. You're twisting my arm. Amazon.
Amazon.
Ah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should have known.
Yeah. I mean, on most of these things, I don't think you could find one of these on Amazon.
No.
Most of the other things that I've shown you, drums, tuning forks, rain sticks, they're all everything that we live in this world of Aladdin's lamp.
Yeah.
Rub the bottle and the genie will get you anything, and it's called Amazon.
Patricia, I have a question I'd like to ask.
Yes.
Do you, in working with people and sound, and this would apply not only to Peter, but to anyone, do you notice a difference between responsiveness of your client when you're in, say, a minor key or a major key,
That's a wonderful question.
or versus say an E or an F? Do they respond differently to those sorts of things?
That's a two-part question. So I'm going to answer the first part first, which is minor. There is a lot of, not a lot, but some research that has been done in tracking. There was a fellow named Manfred Kleinis who measured what certain notes and intervals. He had people hold a pen or a pencil, and they would play a note or an interval and see if they made a certain mark that could be tracked, that this was a universal response. So you could look into that. What I do know is that they've tracked lullabies from around the world, lullabies from many different cultures, and found very similar melodies and intervallic patterns in those melodies. So there are certain intervals, and again, it's not the note. There's a lot of I'm constantly battling in the world of sound healing something we call frequencyism, where people want a correspondence between a certain note. It's not the note, it's the relationship. So if you have a few notes in relationship that make a certain feeling, it's not it's an ongoing question, but it's definitely one that's worth asking. So I don't have a definitive answer again, but I think there are certain why is martial music, when we identify marching music, it's certain rhythms, but it's also certain melodic patterns that are very similar. Dirges from culture to culture, a funeral dirge, a chant. Why is it a certain, more often minor key than not? Why are so many of the blues in minor keys? So those are certain indicators. Yeah. All right. I'm over time.
Okay. Well,
Thank you so
thank you so much, Peter.